Hey everyone. On this episode of Teeter Talks, I had an amazing conversation with Dr. Kim Foster. You might be familiar with her. She has an incredible platform on YouTube, tons of followers. She is a former MD turned reinvention expert. She's an author, a keynote speaker, and she helps people change their lives by changing who they believe they are. We had such a great chat about making big changes, pivoting, and really reinventing ourselves at regardless of the stage of your career or your life. We really talk about alignment and what that means for our identity and what's possible. It was such a great conversation. I hope everyone takes the time to listen and check out her content. She is just so impressive and impactful. Everybody, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Kim Foster. Hello, Dr. Kim Foster. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you, Marissa?
I am doing great. I am so excited to speak with you, not only because I'm very fascinated by you and your journey. And if I may be so bold to say, I see some parallels in some of the big, bold moves that you and I have made career wise as of late. But I also feel like this conversation we're about to have around reinvention, around making big, bold moves and life changes is coming up more and more in conversations that I'm having with clients, with friends. I just think it's immensely relevant and I can't wait to chat about it. So I'm so grateful that you're here today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you too.
Fantastic. So I think we should tell people a little bit about your story because it's a good one. Um, she chuckles. Um, she's like, I know it's my story. This is what I've gone through.
Yeah.
And I do want to get to people's reactions. That is definitely a question that I have. But after over 20 years as a MD, as a medical doctor,
Mhm.
at the age of 47, you decided you didn't want to be a medical doctor anymore and you wanted to shift into a whole different career. Can you maybe take us back to that moment when you realized that that just wasn't what you wanted to do anymore? Was it like a big aha? Was it like a gradual nagging feeling? What did that look like for you?
Well, it was varied for sure, but more gradual than a big aha.
Mm,
There was kind of punctuations of big breakthrough moments, but it was more like the slow accumulation of a realization that I was misaligned, that I had become misaligned in what I was doing, and that I was outgrowing that old version of myself, like that old career that I had chosen for myself when I was 17. So, we choose our career paths at the tender age of 17 when we know everything about the
mhm.
world and
Of
everything about
course.
ourselves. um, but then over the years, there was just quiet whispering, hints, clues. Sometimes I would ignore it, sometimes I would push it down. But it got louder and louder and harder to ignore until eventually, yeah, I walked away.
There's something you said that stuck is this idea of it no longer aligned. And I think it's important to say that sometimes we make decisions and it makes sense in the moment and it makes sense for many moments thereafter. But I think there's something about our culture and where this idea of commitment means you just have to tough it out no matter what. This is what you've chosen. And we won't get into relationships today. We're talking about careers and things like that. But I think sometimes people think, well, this is just the ebb and flow of what I've chosen. And this is the decision that I've made. And this is the commitment. And I'm going to just stick with it. And I think it's okay to realize that sometimes what we want changes.
Yeah, it absolutely all hinges on giving yourself permission to
Mm,
change, permission to evolve. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were wrong before. So when I was 17 and I knew what I knew, it wasn't a wrong decision,
right.
but I made the best decision that I could at the time with the information that I had about the world and myself. But yeah, we make these calls and then we put ourselves on a path, and it's very hard to step off that path.
Mm,
Particularly, I mean, I can only speak for my situation in this, but particularly being in a career that's competitive, difficult to get into, carries a certain amount of prestige, a lot of stability, a lot of security, and society, of course, needs it. And
Yeah.
as we know, there's a shortage of doctors. So there were a lot of reasons why I felt like it was wrong for me to change my mind on this. And so that was the constant tug of war that I had going on over the years when I was feeling like I wanted something different, but there were all these reasons why it felt wrong to even want something different, let alone actually take active steps towards it. So, yeah, there's a sunk cost fallacy also definitely plays into it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
people would always, even if and I kept it very close to my vest, but people who did know me, or if I did talk about what I was considering or going through, a common comment was, well, why would you just throw that all away? It took you so long to get
Right.
there. It was a lot of years of education and training. And why would you just walk away from all of that? And of course, that's just sunk cost fallacy. Like, if it's no longer the thing that is fulfilling you, then it doesn't matter how long it took you to get there. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
keep just martyring yourself
Yep.
to that. And what I realized when I let myself free, let myself off the hook, when I realized that I didn't get that education to box myself in. I gave myself that education so that I would have choices and happiness and fulfillment in my life. And so if it no longer was doing that, then it didn't make any sense to be beholden to that education.
That's so powerful. And I want to stay on the moment you realized and what you did, because I eventually want to hear what people's reactions were. And we already kind of touched on what people's reactions were,
Yeah.
which I'm sure played into your decision. I think a lot of people these days are stuck and afraid to make these big, bold moves because they're worried about what everyone else is going to think.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the little steps, as you remember them, that you had to take to get yourself to be able to kind of pull the trigger, if you will?
Yeah, so I remember one time I was working in a clinic, and it was in the middle of the week, and I hadn't been having a great week, and I just really wasn't feeling great about what I was doing. So this one day when I started the day, I decided to keep a tally of how many patient encounters I actually enjoyed,
Mm.
or they felt satisfying or meaningful to me personally. And I just had two columns, positive interaction, negative interaction. And I just, after each patient, I do my charting, and then I just give myself a little tick in whichever column I felt that interaction landed in. And at the end of the day, I had 5 in the positive out of 32 patients that I had
Oh my
seen all
goodness.
day. And I looked at that and I just thought, I, I can't, if this is what it's going to be like, I can't continue living like this for the next 30 years. That is just, I can't do that to myself. So that was a really that was a black and white
Mm.
on paper um, wake up call for sure.
And I know when you and I spoke, and you kind of just alluded to it now, is this idea that I don't, your medical career and that journey was not a waste. It actually gave you clarity and really pointed you in the direction of how you can actually serve more people. Because you said there was a lot of interactions you did have, and I don't know what the common thread was for those 5 ones that you identified on that one day, that really did fulfill you. And that was the part of the job you loved the most, the humanity and the connection and actually having the conversations and really trying to help people and have an impact on them. It was almost as if, that 20 years in medicine helped you really hone in on, and some people might say that was a long journey to get there. Regardless, it all served you and teased you up to get you to realize what you actually, and focus you in on what you actually wanted to do. Does that ring true to you in any way?
Yes, absolutely. That rings true. And what I often say to people also who are considering, a reinvention or a change of their life is that you don't have to throw everything away that has come
Yes.
before. Even if
Yes.
you are making a big change, you get to bring what has come before with you. So for me, yes, all of those years, even though some of it was hard and some of it was not great, there were so many elements of that, so many things that I learned about people, about humanity, about myself, about so many things that, of course, I'm not just going to try and erase that or pretend it didn't happen
Right.
just because I'm not going to be practicing medicine anymore, like clinical medicine in the traditional sense. And so you do, even if you are on the brink of a complete reinvention or an overhaul or starting fresh, you don't have to pretend that your prior
Yeah.
life didn't happen. You get to bring that with you because it's part of you. People sometimes, commenters on YouTube give me a hard time because I still
Shocking.
have, yeah, and sometimes because I still have Kim Foster MD as my YouTube channel. And some people say, why are you still, how
Mm.
can you still call yourself a doctor? And I mean, for one thing, it's an academic, it's a degree. I don't have to give, doctors don't have to give their degrees back
Nope.
when they retire. So I get to keep my degree. But also, it's part of who I am. It's part of
Yeah.
my background. It was a lot of years of who I was. And so I feel like that is the context, that's the background of where I'm coming from. And even though I'm not practicing clinical medicine anymore, it still is who I am. And so you're allowed to reinvent yourself and keep all the
Yeah.
old pieces of yourself that got you to this point.
And ironically, would you have even gotten to this point had you not gone through that past version of yourself? Like, how do you become a reinvention expert had you not reinvented yourself, right? How do you help other people rebuild and start over and find what they're destined to do if you didn't have the actual experience of going through it? And to be honest with you, when you were 17 picking careers, had that been on the table, which it certainly was not, I'm sure, to be a, wellness coach and teach people how to you would have been like, well, what the heck do I bring to the table to be able to teach this? And I can relate. I mean, when I left wealth management and an executive, I had a lot of people say to me, listen, like you got to the top as a woman in an industry that there are not a lot of women at the top. Why would you
Mhm.
leave? Why would you walk
Mm.
away from that? And obviously it's more complicated than that, but I take everything that was a part of my experience in that space in my corporate world, getting there, and I use it now to serve in this space. I mean, that is the toolbox that I have amassed, and those are the tools that I've sharpened. Had I not gone through that, I wouldn't be able to serve in the way that I'm serving today. And I think that's a really important piece is to not have shame in where we came from or feel like we were lost or misdirected. Although some people maybe do feel that way, feel like they never really, at least you felt aligned with what you were doing for many, many years. And maybe it wasn't
Mm.
until the later part of your career that you thought there's something that doesn't seem fully aligned. But I think where we come from, even if it's in a totally different place than where we're going, is a big part of getting us through the next phase of our journey. It's that expression, what got you here may not be what gets you there. And I always try to think that way so we can all kind of forgive ourselves for, the journeys that we've been on and say, hey, it's just part of who I am.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. And it's about living through that experience too, to your point of how, you know, if I had just had a linear career path, then wouldn't have quite the connection with people who are actually
Right.
trying to make a sharp left turn, a pivot, because it's what I lived through. All of those emotional ups, downs, fears,
Mm.
all the things that came along that journey to choosing a different future for myself. People have asked me if I regretted going to medical school, and I definitely do not. I do not regret making that choice. I don't regret getting that training, choosing that career. I mean, it's a it's such a privileged role to have
Mm.
in society. And I mean, it's a privilege that people give. Patients trusted me with everything, with their so much vulnerability, so much of their own fears, life and death issues, family, just so many things. And so I would never want to have not gone through that. It's really has made me who I am. So I don't regret that. If I hadn't made the shift though, and really become honest with myself that that era was over and it was time to move on to something else, that I would have regretted.
Yeah. And I think there's another distinction here is that sometimes when people want to make big life pivots or changes, it doesn't mean they're leaving something terrible. Like being a
Right.
doctor is not a terrible career. It's not,
Yeah.
and I think people make that distinction to be like you're escaping something or running away from something. And really it's about, well, no, what are you running towards? What is calling to you that you're maybe you've been ignoring for a little while or a long while, what can you go after versus what can you run from? So I've alluded to it a few times. I'm dying to know what the people in your life said, and you've kind of teased us already with some feedback, but what was the general reaction, or what was the craziest reaction that you got from someone? You're like, you know what, I think I'm just done with this whole MD thing.
Yeah, I mean, of course, as you can imagine, a lot of people were surprised or confused.
Mm,
Confusion was a very
mm,
common reaction. Um, and anger sometimes would happen, especially because, as I said, we know that family doctors are in short supply in this country. And so it was, and I felt this too, am I betraying
mm,
society by stepping away and making the world one family doctor shorter? And some people really did have that feeling and
interesting.
expressed it to me.
Mm,
So that wasn't great. Um, but the people who were really the closest to me, like my inner circle, they weren't surprised.
mm,
Because you can tell when, and also I'm not great at hiding my feelings to the people who are the closest to me. So they weren't surprised and generally pretty supportive. I mean, of course, it's nice when your daughter is a doctor and you can say that, and I know that, and my dad said that, point blank. He liked that, and that
yeah,
was a very honest moment for him. But at the same time, he absolutely understood the drive to want to be fulfilled and happy. That
mm,
was the reason why I pursued medicine in the first place, because I wanted a career that fulfilled me and made a difference and made me happy. So if it was no longer doing some of those things, then it was time to change. And so the people who were closest to me did understand, but people who weren't as close, I mean, yeah, colleagues, just casual acquaintances, most didn't really understand it,
mm,
unless, and this is the other exception, people who are in their own, on the journey themselves of
yes,
trying to walk away from something that's good on paper. Because I am not the only one, as you know, Marissa. Like,
yeah,
there are a lot of people who have all the trappings on paper and it seems like the perfect life, and they are inside not happy at all. So when I encountered people like that and shared what I was doing, those were the people who were thrilled. Their eyes would light up and they would want to know more. How did I
yeah.
do it? What am I going through? How am I walking away? All of those pieces. So yeah, I encountered a fair number of those people too.
I bet. And I'm curious because, I mean, the same way your dad, I'm sure, liked to introduce you as his daughter who's a doctor. Now he can just say my daughter who formerly was a doctor, which I think probably leaves people even more curious,
Intrigued.
um, and very intrigued, because certainly you're too young to retire. So they're like, what is she doing? Um, what, I think we create these identities for ourselves, right? I am Kim, the doctor. This is who I am. This is, even though it's just something we do. And I think arguably, the more invested we become in our jobs, sometimes that line blurs between who we are and what we do. How did you deal with rebuilding your identity after you decided that, I'm not going to do this anymore? I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to make a shift. Who am I now? What was there was there a conscious process you went through to rebuild your identity?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I didn't rebuild it all in one go, because
Mm,
that rebuilding process is a biggie, and it's complicated and it's all wrapped up in all kinds of emotion. But that identity piece of letting go of that identity of doctor, even though, as we talked about, I wasn't going to erase it or pretend it didn't happen, but it was always the identity that I led with. Whenever people would, and people commonly ask you, so what do you do? Or you get a form and you have to fill out what your line of work is. And so it was always the first thing. And so to letting go of that, the idea of letting go of that was terrifying and very challenging. And even when I had figured out what I was going to be doing and had started doing it and it was successful and I was logistically capable of walking away from medicine, it was that identity piece that really kept me tethered.
mm,
And that was the hardest bit to undo. Um, but stepwise, I tried out different things. There was one time when I was I was trying out a new dentist. So this was somebody who didn't know me at all. And I was sort of mid journey of leaving medicine. And he was, as they do with their hands in their mouth, asking me what I do. And I would normally say I'm a family doctor because it's just easy. And that's just, well, not just easy, it was true. But this time I decided to try it out, like just to try out saying something different. So I said, I'm a writer. And it wasn't not true because I was at that time doing a lot of writing and I wanted to do more writing as I went. So it wasn't not true, but it wasn't, of course, the whole story. And it was so weird. It felt really like I was holding something back. Like I was putting on a Halloween costume of being a writer to this stranger that I didn't know. And it was a really fascinating exercise to go through, to try that on, to feel what it would feel like to say something other than I'm a family doctor, which is what I had been saying for years and years and years. But it was interesting. It was really interesting, the reaction, the follow up questions were all different than the typical follow up questions that I would get. So, yeah, I kept on trying to push the envelope, push myself into how would it feel to let go of that identity and choose intentionally a new identity for myself.
It's so funny because I suspect your identity as a doctor has probably still followed you. There's probably people you run into in your community that still know you as the family doctor. Maybe you were their family doctor, or they just don't know that you've changed careers. But I do find it so funny because there are people that even I run into in my community today that still know me from the company that I worked at 2 companies ago, because that was
Oh,
how they connected me to that. And they really have no idea what I do now. And it's so funny because I had a conversation with one of my clients recently who's going through a big life change and left this big corporate job. And she was at an event and someone asked her what she did recently. And she goes, I went into a full monologue because I couldn't just say, I'm between jobs, or I used to do
right.
this. She's like, well, I used to do this, but I've chosen, she goes, I felt the need to explain to people so that I didn't seem like a failure, or I was, she just said, like, I just went into this whole monologue instead of just
Mm.
saying, I'm between jobs right now. I'm a corporate executive, period. And it's funny because you talk about filling out forms. When I first became self-employed, I would really kind of write out executive coach, or now I'm just like SE, self-employed. Like I don't,
Yeah.
but I think for a long time there's so much, there's maybe a little bit of comfort in it. There's a certain amount of stability and familiarity that we get from anchoring ourselves to these titles or these
Mm.
roles, that just kind of, to your point, when we tell people, it either garners a certain amount of respect or prestige or something. Um, but then when they go away and we have a different title, we're like, oh, people still like us and they don't really think much differently of us, which is,
They're
you realize
just
it's all in your
carrying
head.
on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so funny. You don't need to have an existential crisis every time somebody asks you, "So, what do you do at a cocktail party or filling out a form?" But I mean, it happens. And
Yes,
definitely it happens because these
for sure.
questions really get to the core of what is my value to society, and so we all want to feel like we have value to society.
For sure.
Of course, I think that's just and that feeling like we belong and that we're contributing and all of those things. And so it's really handy to have a little title that is shorthand for all of those pieces.
Yes.
And when you don't have that anymore, it's hard to let that go. Let's be honest.
It's so true. We joked about that at a family dinner once about how, my brother-in-law's teacher, my sister's physio, like they just have
Yeah.
these very specific, well, there's no follow-up questions. Whereas I feel like I need a good 5 minutes to really explain to you what, what I
Explain.
do every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways. So, let's just say there's someone out there listening who, and this is really funny. And I told you has come up a lot recently with people that I've, friends and clients. And we got to talking about this idea of, what we typically call this midlife crisis, right? We've
Mhm.
identified the midlife crisis, and it has like a negative connotation that we've slapped onto it, I think. And we attribute it to fancy cars and, whatever else, material changes, physical changes, life changes. But I wonder if there's just something in us, you know, as we evolve as creatures, as humans, that we really should be having these midlife check-ins, quarter life check. I mean,
Mhm.
probably more frequent to check in and to say, am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I aligned? What kind of questions would you encourage people to ask themselves before this turns into a bigger thing than it needs to be, or before they live the rest of their lives completely miserable and misaligned with what they probably should be doing when they could have made changes? What are some helpful questions we can ask ourselves to understand if we are where we should be?
Yeah, it's so important. And this is such a great issue because I personally do believe that most of us are just carrying on, living on autopilot. We
Mm,
make those big decisions at those inflection points, like when we're choosing what we're going to major in university, what career
yeah.
path we're going to go down. And so we do soul searching at that time. And then because that decision process is hard and it's confronting, I think we just sort of say, okay, done, aside. Now just carry on. That's definitely what I did. I describe those years after I made the decision that I wanted to get into medical school. I just strapped in and just put my head down and did what I needed to do to get there. And that gave me such direction and focus. And it gave structure to my life. I knew what I had to do. So it was really, in a sense, easy. And I didn't have to constantly question um, if I was doing the right thing, if I was on the right path. So, and that's what leads us to waking up 10, 20, 30 years later thinking, my God, how did I get here? Like,
Mhm.
what? Why am I in this life that doesn't even feel like it's my own life? So, I absolutely recommend, just like you said, to check in with yourself often. In fact, I recommend daily, a
Yeah.
daily alignment check, just to, and I do this myself every day. Who am I being in this day? Who am I? Who's the person I'm becoming? Who I am, a woman who dot dot dot, whatever it is that day. And because when you're checking in regularly, you can't get so off track
Right.
and just strap in and get caught up in the doing and the actioning, and the following through and the staying committed to the plan that you made way
Mhm.
back when. But if you're constantly checking, it's like, an airplane is off course 90% of the time. And you just had the pilot is just constantly making little adjustments, right? Stephen Covey, I think, said that in his book. Um, yeah, so that's what we need to do. Otherwise, we're going to think that we're heading one way and we end up landing completely somewhere different, without really realizing it. So I think those regular check-ins of, who am I making this decision from, my past self or my future self? I ask myself
Mm.
that question a lot. And is this the way my future self would choose to behave, or would make this call in this moment, or is that my previous self who has evolved? And so I think checking in with yourself on a daily basis, and then of course when there are other decisions, or boundaries, or any of those moments that come up in your day, and it's easy to just knee jerk to who you've been before, what your old self is used to, the comfort zone decisions and reactions. But taking that breath and just making sure that you're not acting on autopilot, that what you're doing is in alignment with where you want to go.
And how would you make the distinction between tough moments, right? Tough seasons of life when you just have to, buckle down,
Mhm.
get through what's happening. Like this is still what you want, but it's really hard. It's a season. How do you tell the difference between hard seasons or hard moments and really just not being in alignment with what you're doing?
Yeah, that's not easy at all. And you mentioned that at the beginning, this idea of commitment and committing to tough things. So this is not about flaking out and just the moment that something gets difficult, you just check out. Um, I think it really starts with having a very clear vision of where you actually do want to go. That needs to come first. And then each time, when you do hit a tough moment, is it getting through that tough moment, is it going to get you to where you actually want to go?
Mm.
Or are you just gritting your teeth because you think that's what you're supposed to do, but it's not actually going to get you where you want to be. It's like, are you making a recipe and you can be working really hard to to measure everything correctly and get all the ingredients correctly added and baked and all of those things, but if you, and then realizing you don't even actually like that dish.
Right.
So because you can get very caught up in the just like execution phase of things. So I think it starts by being very clear, where am I heading, and is this particular tough moment, is this in service of getting me there or not?
Yeah. And it's funny because I think I also don't think we allow ourselves to think about that because we're so deep in autopilot
Mm-hmm.
and we're so deep in our routines and our commitments. And I think a lot of people would say, I am too old, or I'm in too deep, or I only have X amount of years left before my pension kicks in. Insert whatever excuse here that you think has you tethered to this train that you're on that is not really taking you to, like you said, to where you want to go or the person that you want to be. What do you say to that about people who are just like, I'm too old, I'm in too deep? How do we give ourselves the mental space to think differently about what's possible for us at different stages of life?
Well, I think it's about getting honest with yourself about what you're really afraid of. So, because people say that all the time, I'm too old. And
Mm,
of course, it's not true. I can pull out all kinds of examples of people who started over completely or got a late start at
mhm.
their their zone of genius that ended up being their unique contribution to the world, like Julia Child, and like all
Yeah.
there's all we all have all kinds of examples. So it's objectively not true that you're too old or that it's too late, but because people say this so often, what's the real fear under that? Are you saying that because it's a nice shorthand, and it gets you off the hook of actually stepping out of your comfort zone? Because if you just grasp for, I'm too old, that means you don't have to put yourself in an uncomfortable position of starting over because you've given yourself a really convenient, very rational sounding excuse. So, with love, are you making an excuse because you really are afraid of something else? And we all have different things that we're afraid of. Some of us are very afraid of judgment. Some of us are very afraid of failure, looking
Mhm.
foolish, um, making a mistake, losing money. Like there's all kinds of different fears that we all have. And so it's a matter for each of us individually. We have to really look at, okay, what am I actually afraid of here? And then that's the fear to confront, not the I'm too old story, but what am I really afraid of if I were to make a change here?
And when you look at people who know they need to make a change, and I think a lot of people are maybe more in this boat than the latter, but I think there's a lot of people out there who know they want to do something different. They just don't know what it is. And
Hmm.
figuring out what it is, like I always tell people, if you know what you want, you're just too afraid to do it. That's a blessing because most people don't even know what they want to do, right? So at least you want to, I don't know, open a bakery. That's your dream. You've always dreamt of it. That's a different problem than people who just know they're not where they're meant to be but aren't really sure where they should be. How would you help someone work through that? And I don't know, like, did you know exactly where you would end up when you left, being a doctor? Was it like, I'm sure I'm going to do this, or I'm just going to slowly start? Like I always tell people, it's direction over destination right now.
Hmm.
It's doing things that move you, that feel right, listening to your gut, trusting your future self, doing things that feel a little more aligned and start taking you into a direction, saying yes. And who knows, you may head down a path because you're heading in the right direction towards what you think is a destination that you're headed. And you may, do a complete detour and end up somewhere better than you could have dreamt up because you didn't limit yourself to, again, just that one destination that you put your mind to. What about for you? Did you know what you wanted to do? And then what would you advise people who maybe don't know what they want exactly?
Hmm. Yeah, this is a very common problem. And no, I absolutely didn't know what I was going
Okay.
to do. I didn't even know what was possible, what was out there. I mean, my whole professional life had been built around medicine and healthcare, and so I didn't even know what other things people could do.
So funny.
So and that's the same for many people, especially if
Mhm.
you've been in a particular industry or a particular role for a long time. You just don't know what you don't know yet. And but that's not a reason to stay where you are necessarily. um, but it is a reason to giving yourself permission to play with things and just try things on and experiment a little bit. It's not what's not going to help you to figure it out is just sitting and thinking about it. That's not going to help you.
No.
I mean, I am a huge journaling advocate. If I didn't have my journal, I would be nowhere because I figure out a lot of things, what's going on in my own head through my journal. So, yes, I definitely advocate doing soul searching and journaling, but that's not the only thing you can do to really figure things out. You have to try stuff on. Tell your dentist that you're becoming a writer,
Everyone's going
whatever.
to start booking appointments with new dentists so they can test new identities. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's giving yourselves permission to test things out, get into the lab, get kind of scientific and curious about it, and just think, well, let me think about what are the pieces. I mean, this is always a good spot to start, is what are the pieces of my current role that I actually really do
Mm.
love? Like what lights me up about this? There's usually something, even if you're in a job that you are well done with, there's usually some elements. So for me, working with people, interacting with people, helping them, teaching them was really, I'd always go way over my times because I was teaching people about how things worked and why this made sense, and that kind of thing. And so those are the pieces that I was able to bring with me when I started a YouTube channel, for
Yes.
example, because it's still a platform for sharing and teaching and helping. So, looking looking for clues in
Mhm.
what you're currently doing. So what are the pieces that I still like? What would I love to do, but maybe in a different way? But really, it's so much about giving yourself permission to experiment and try it on, and not just sit there and think about it, but actually get out there and do, or take a class in something, and or join a group, and or informational interview somebody about what they do, and just play and experiment and learn and try things on is what I usually advise people to do.
I agree. I've been in the season of yes since I started this whole
Yeah.
thing. People are like, "Do you do this?" And I'm like, "Yep." "Do you do this?" "Sure." Like I will I mean, if I don't like it, I won't say yes again, but how do
Mhm.
you trust me, you cannot possibly dream up what's possible for you. Your own limiting beliefs will get in the way, and you're destined for so much more than you could possibly come up with. And so yeah, you should put yourself out there. I think it's important to note that sometimes people just need to change companies. Sometimes people
Mm.
just need to change jobs within the company. Sometimes, but I mean, you and I are speaking as people who went off and started their own businesses, and but that doesn't you don't have to do that, right? There are so many different options to mix things up, to try new things, to put yourself out there in a different way, that you have to trust yourself. You have to listen to your gut. You have to try things on, experiment. I just think people are so much more capable than they give themselves credit for. And I love the idea of making a list of all the things you love to do or that you're good at, and then
Mm.
looking at that list and going, what else? Like, take your industry out of it, take your education out of it, your certifications, and go, what other things? Like, true story, I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up.
Mm.
So when I registered for university, I was registered to go pre-med, and that was what I wanted to do. Well, I lasted 1 week in that program because I had an epiphany that there's other ways you can help people that don't involve being a doctor. Now, I'm still very fascinated by medicine, and have obviously a lot of respect for the profession, but I realized it wasn't for me, and I'm glad I realized it then.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and not years later, but I knew that I wanted to help people. And again, when I was picking options what I want to be when I grow up, it was like, okay, teacher, this. Do you think business coach was on the table? And even investments, where I ended up, that wasn't, I didn't see other people doing that, or women represented in movies or out there that I could mimic. So it's I think people don't even know what's potentially possible for them, and I think need to trust that they are capable of pivots and things will work out probably better than they think. Would you agree?
Oh, I 100% agree. And what you'd said a minute ago, you're absolutely right that it doesn't necessarily, if you're feeling unsatisfied, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to just completely change to a different industry and just abandon everything that you've done before. I mean, I tried that. I tried different clinics. I practiced medicine in 3 different provinces. I went to like academic medicine. I worked at the university clinic with university students and student health, and that was actually really fun. And I tried it in a salaried because the fee for service thing was really getting me down. And then I tried a variety of ways. I cut down my hours. I tried incorporating more things into my life that were not career related hobbies and things like that to see if I could just get more satisfaction. So I
You're like,
tried
this knitting will surely
everything.
help me feel better about my job.
Yes, exactly. So, and
Oh,
if any of those strategies had really brought me true fulfillment, that would have been great.
sure.
That would have been obviously an easier path. And my dad would have probably been happier with that. But that, so I think you do owe it to yourself not to just like immediately at the first sign of discomfort just throw the baby out with the bathwater. But at the same time, if you maybe have tried pivots or different circumstances, a different company, and there's still this niggling feeling that you are meant for something different, then you owe it to yourself to not just carry on living the life that you chose for yourself way back when, but if and asking yourself, I think it's a really useful question to ask yourself regularly, yearly for sure, but maybe
Hmm.
more often. Am I living the life that I would choose again if I were to choose again, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a strategy that people use sometimes to decide if a possession is something that if I was
Mm.
going to buy this again, would I buy it again? But we can ask ourselves that question about our life, our job, our career, our lifestyle, all of those pieces.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier. I think we get caught. I see so many things on social media about consistency and commitment. And
Mm.
I think you can be very consistent and committed even if you change paths every year. You can be very committed in what you're doing right now, very consistent in where you're at today, and then you can pivot and change and be very consistent and committed to that as well too. Commitment and consistency, in my opinion, doesn't mean you're doing the same thing forever and you never look up or question it or never come up for air to decide if this still suits you. That's not, I think, what it's intended to do. Um, but I think a lot of people get caught in that for sure. I'm curious. I love talking about success.
Mm.
And I'm curious when you look at success today. I mean, you've obviously built a very successful career now. You've built a successful business, over 200,000 followers on YouTube, wonderfully valuable and impactful content. You seem very happy. We've talked a little bit about your life that you've created for yourself, a little bit of harmony between your work and your play. Arguably, I think a lot of people would look at you and go, it was worth it. She's successful. She pulled it off. But when you look at success back then, because I think a lot of people probably would have said you were a very successful doctor as well, too.
Mm.
How would you define success maybe now? And how did that evolve for you going through this?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, of course, when I was younger, success, like for many people too, success would is really defined as those external markers.
Of
So
course. Yes.
degrees and titles and approval and all of that stuff. And that for many people, for many of us, is synonymous with success. And it was for me, absolutely. So as I've become older and changed my own life, I've really come to understand that success is so much more about alignment, which we've used this word before too, and I use it a lot.
Hmm.
It's when your inner life matches your outer life, and it doesn't need to make sense to anyone else. Nobody
Mm.
else needs to get this except for you. So if you are aligned inside with the life that you've created for yourself, then that is success. You're completely congruent with your own values and your inner world. And so that's absolutely success, but it's not exactly what society tells us is the definition of success. Although I do think that that's shifting. I do
Mm.
think that people are increasingly done with the hustle culture and with the external trappings. But, just it is an ingrained part of human nature to equate success with that success on paper concept. And yeah, absolutely. That was one of the big things that I was battling as I was considering if I could even walk away, is that it was successful on paper. And that's what made it so hard to walk away. And people still really still don't understand that, many people. But that's okay because I understand it and it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense for me. And I'm not living my life for other people so that other people can be comfortable with my choices.
Yeah.
It's so that I can be comfortable with my choices and feel good about that.
And it's so funny because no one else really cares. We make all
No.
these decisions thinking I will appear more successful or I will, but everything is bouncing off other people's views of us, other people's thoughts of us. And I'm going to mess up this quote, and I've said it before on here, but I love it. It's, our self-esteem or our views of ourselves are not what we think of ourselves. It's not even what other people think of us. It's what we think other people think of us.
Yeah,
Right. So
exactly.
again, it's this fabrication of, you could have all the money in the world, driving the fanciest cars, dressed to the nines, and you think people must think I'm really successful. Whereas people are not even thinking about you. They don't, they don't even care. And
No,
that
they're
is a
just living
tough,
their own life. Yeah.
yes, they're worried about their own success, which is kind
Hmm.
of a funny thing. I'm curious if you have, you talked about some daily practices that you do to make sure, and I love the word alignment. I mean, I think,
Hmm.
everyone needs to find their own version of that. And I think if you are out of alignment, you're, you could be ignoring it, but don't ignore your gut and figure out what little micro habits or little micro changes you can do because they add up. So for you, what would you recommend to people in terms of daily habits or little micro changes that really make a difference in creating some alignment?
Yeah, I really do think that the cornerstone habit is your identity alignment.
Mm,
We keep saying this word alignment, but
I love it.
that's really the key because
Yeah.
it's like it's the cornerstone for everything else. Everything else flows from that, because if you're really clear on who you are and the story that you're telling yourself about what you're capable of, if you're really clear on that, then your daily habits flow from that. So because the morning routine of somebody who believes themselves to be this type of person is different than the morning routine of somebody who believes themselves to be this other kind
Mhm.
of person. So, I love habits. I'm big on morning routines, and I have all kinds of daily habits, but they're curated for me because they make sense with my identity and what my goals and life that I'm shaping are. So, movement, journaling, morning routines, all of those things are key habits, but only when they're selected in accordance with your identity. So, checking in with yourself about what's the story you're telling yourself about who you are. And if there's a habit that you want to adopt, but it just doesn't seem to stick, then that's a great time to question, well, is there an identity issue there? Do I really
Mm.
believe that I'm capable of doing that? Or am I just trying to stick that habit onto an outdated identity that I really need to revise?
It's like me trying to wake up at 4 a.m. when I tried to do that. I am not a 4 a.m. person. I really tried to be, but I am not. And I'm over it. And I'm much happier not being a 4 a.m. person.
There you
But
go.
but I love the word alignment because I think what it gives people the space to make it their own. So we're not
Mhm.
trying to tie ourselves to an identity that's been predetermined or version of success or whatever, or a path that's been decided. It's like, and it seems like it is ever evolving, right? How you feel today and what is in alignment with your identity today, it doesn't have to be the same 3 months from now. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to change and evolve and change our minds and pivot. And I say it all the time. I've said it already on this episode, this idea of committing and being consistent. It's like, I actually think it's more impressive for people to go, nope, that's not for me anymore. And this is for me, and to kind of commit. And, you don't want to flip flop around too much, but I do think alignment gives you the space to really listen to how you're feeling and what's going on in your life and what you need in this moment, and to stick with that until it doesn't make sense anymore. So I think people can really make alignment their own and almost maybe a more powerful guiding force than what maybe success has typically been for a lot of people,
Mhm.
is how do I find alignment? Because to your point, I think that's where the real success comes from, is if you can really live in alignment with who you think you are, or who you're meant to be, or who you're capable of.
Yes, because that becomes your North Star. And then you
Yeah.
can be discerning about all the other inputs or
Mm,
decisions and things. Does this fit with this identity? Does this fit with my core identity? And because otherwise we're so, and it's you're not wrong. It's not a bad thing. It's just we're so susceptible to what society wants it from us, what family wants it from us, what
mhm.
friends or whoever, other people, what my past self wanted me to do. All of those influences can become very loud unless you're really clear on who you are now. And I love what you just said too about how we got to give ourselves permission to change that. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's more than okay. It's required really to reassess that and revise and keep moving forward, because of course we're all evolving, whether you recognize it or not. As you go through your life, you are going to change. So in a sense, it doesn't make any sense to that you are still going to keep on holding on, gripping tightly onto the things that were true for you in the past. It's okay for them to change.
Yeah. In fact, I wish it upon everybody. I wish everybody has a midlife. We're going to rename it realignment instead of crisis. I hope everyone has a
Yes,
quarter life
yes.
realignment. In fact, sooner, because I think we need to be asking ourselves, are we where we want to be? This is a leadership podcast, not a hard hitting one by any means, but I speak to people who I think are doing incredible work leading. You have such a impactful platform. Your content is incredible. You help a lot of people not only transform, but do something, kind of post the decision to transform, and really make something of their pivot and of their reinvention. How do you define leadership, or what would you say is some of the best leadership advice you've ever given or received?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think that leadership is about being the loudest or the most dominant or the one who comes across the most powerfully. Um, and I think it's just easy. And of course, that's what I used to believe too. But I've come to understand that leadership is not about that, that it's really, and who the person who's going to be a leader for one person is not going to be a leader for another person. So it's
Mm.
not about like I'm a leader of all, but on my YouTube channel, for example, and YouTube is just such a great playground for seeing this, because the leaders in your whatever it is that you are needing to be, looking for guidance on, are are not going to make sense for somebody who's looking for leadership in how to become a great gardener. uh, they're looking for something completely different, and so I show up as a leader in this particular
Mhm.
field because I've lived it, because I'm in alignment with this concept, and I've worked with people. And again, to go back to that alignment thing, I really think it's that congruence and alignment piece. So the people who can show up as leaders in a particular space are the ones who are in alignment with what it means to be helping other people to see the way and helping other people to find their own path. It's not me being bossy or telling anyone else what to do or overexerting authority. It's not that. It's just it's showing up in alignment
Mhm.
and being available to help and serve other people on their journey who might be a couple steps back or a little bit lost or whatever, and in need of leadership at that moment.
Yep. Beautiful. I agree. I completely agree. Okay, so of course we're running out of time. These things always fly by so fast. I do want to ask you some rapid fire questions really quickly.
Mhm.
Um, what do you do when you need a confidence boost?
So when I need a confidence boost, I really am dropping into my future self. So,
Hmm.
physically, physiologically, shoulders, deep belly breathing, and really have that very clear vision of the woman that I'm becoming, not who I've been. So it's really about embodying my future self at that moment.
I like that. Um, what do you wish you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self?
20-year-old self. Yeah. Um, I would say you're not stuck. You are loyal to an old version of yourself.
Mm, I like that.
Mhm.
One thing you will never miss about being a family physician.
That's really easy. Paperwork.
Oh, okay. I was thinking something disgusting, but
No.
we'll go with
Oh
paperwork.
no,
Yeah,
I passed over the disgusting, like, yeah, it's hard for me to
it's the
get
paperwork.
grossed out or in blood, and it's all fine. That I worked through all that stuff. Although that was actually, it's such an interesting thing because that was something that almost stopped me from going to medicine because I was very squeamish about blood. And so I
Oh,
said, "Oh, I could never be a doctor because I don't like the sight of blood." And then I don't know why, but I just started questioning that. I was like, well, what if that weren't true? What if that's something that I could get over? If I could get over that, could I actually go to medical school? Actually, I think I could. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting. But no,
that is
it's the
interesting.
paperwork is the
It's the
thing that
paperwork.
I would never mess.
That is a
It's
fair,
not.
fair thing. What is an item on your bucket list that you have already checked off?
I have two. Um, getting my silver play button on YouTube, get
Oh,
crossing a
yes.
hundred
That's
thousand.
amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I just crossed 200,000. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yes, that's amazing.
So, but there's no new button that comes when you get the 200,000. The next one comes at 1 million.
Well,
So I've got a little ways to go, but
that's coming
yeah,
soon. So congratulations on your future million because that's going to happen.
thanks. And the other one is golfing in the Scottish Highlands,
Oh,
which we
wow.
did recently. I love that. That was on my
Well, you
bucket list.
are you are a fan of golf and coffee, I understand. Mhm.
Yes, yes, two my great loves in life.
Yes. Well, I have one of those in common with you. I don't golf, but I do love coffee. So we will have to have some coffee sometime.
hmm
What is your word for 2026 as you look forward to the new year?
hmm I'm not completely locked down on this because we still have a little time, but the word that I have been batting around and that I think I'm going with is expansion.
Oh, I like that. I mean, I was waiting for alignment, but I like expansion.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, so you have a lot going on. We mentioned your YouTube platform, which is incredible. You have some other things up your sleeve. You have a book coming out. You have a TEDx coming up. Tell us about that, and where can people find you?
Mm. Yeah, so you're right. I do have a number of different irons in the fire
Yeah,
at the
you do.
moment. This is a season of a lot of things on the go, but it's all kind of like coming together.
Mm,
So the TEDx is in January in British Columbia, TEDx Surrey, and January 24th. So that,
that's
the
incredible.
video will go live shortly after that. Where people can find me, absolutely my YouTube channel. I mean, that's my home base for all the content and everything that I create. Instagram is a good place for just kind of like a bit more behind the scenes, and it's where I'm
Yeah,
sharing details of TEDx and the book that's going to be launching in June of next year, June 2026. But
amazing.
yeah. And so I
Well,
suppose really the real hub for everything is my website, drkimfoster.com.
perfect. Yes, everything is very
Link.
informative. Very, you can find everything. We'll put everything in the show notes as well, so people can find you. And I would encourage people to go check you out. I find your content so easy to absorb. You're quite delightful and very impactful, and I think it's just wonderful. And I have to say, congratulations on your big bold move. And I'm so thrilled that you've chosen to teach other people how to do this because I think it's absolutely necessary. And thank you for taking the time to chat today. I really enjoyed this and I really appreciate it. And I hope our paths cross again soon.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will, Marissa. This has been really a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. We'll talk to you soon.